1. The resistance you face is proof of the reward you're meant to receive. Opposition isn't a sign you're on the wrong path. It's often evidence you're getting close to something that matters. The bigger the blessing, the greater the battle around it. If you never faced resistance, you'd never realize how strong your purpose really is. 2. You can't claim the promise without confronting the problem. Every promise has a problem attached to it. The two are inseparable. You want the promise, but you'd rather skip the problem. Yet the problem is the proving ground where your faith, your character, and your resilience are developed. 3. Your struggle is the soil where strength grows. What feels like an attack is often an assignment to grow you. The very place you feel weakest is where you're being trained to be strongest. Don't despise the struggle. Dig into it because that's where the treasure is buried. 4. Breakthrough is born in the middle of the battle, not after it. You're waiting for the war to end so you can feel peace, but peace is something you can access during the fight. Breakthrough doesn't come when the struggle stops. It comes when you learn to see beyond the struggle. 5. The enemy targets what God has marked as valuable. The reason you're under attack is because your life has value. The enemy doesn't waste energy on what doesn't threaten him. The pressure you feel is proportional to the potential you carry. If the battle is intense, it's because the blessing is immense. 1. The enemy targets what God has marked as valuable. There's something important you need to understand about the battle you're in right now. The pressure, the resistance, the obstacles that seem to pop up one after the other, none of it is random. The enemy isn't attacking you because you're weak or insignificant. The enemy is attacking because you're carrying something valuable, something that threatens the territory he's been trying to claim in your life, your family, and your purpose. If you could see yourself the way heaven sees you, you'd understand why hell has been working overtime to keep you stuck. You are not just another person trying to get by. You are marked by divine purpose, and your existence carries weight in the unseen realm. People often wonder why their lives seem harder than they expected when they decided to step out and pursue what they believe they were created for. They think if they were really doing what they were meant to do, it would be easier. But ease is not a sign of blessing. Sometimes it's a sign you're no longer a threat. The moment you step into purpose, you also step into conflict. The enemy targets what God has marked as valuable. You can't carry a calling without attracting an attack. That doesn't mean you're cursed. It means you are carrying something so precious that it demands protection, vigilance, and perseverance. Think about it. Thieves don't break into empty houses. They go after the places where they believe something worth stealing is stored. In the same way, your gifts, your potential, your calling, your influence, these are the treasures the enemy wants to steal, kill, and destroy. That's why sometimes you'll notice that the moment you start making progress, the moment you start building something meaningful, suddenly the resistance increases. It's because you've stirred something up in the spiritual realm. You've awakened the awareness of an adversary who is determined to discourage you before you discover the full measure of your strength. You may look around at other people and wonder why they don't seem to face the same level of adversity. You see them coasting while you're fighting for every inch. But comparison will blind you to the blessing hidden inside your battle. Just because someone else isn't facing what you're facing doesn't mean you're behind or doing something wrong. It may simply mean you have a unique assignment that requires unique preparation. The intensity of your warfare often reveals the magnitude of your purpose. It's easy to assume that if you're walking in the right direction, the path should be clear. But over and over, the pattern repeats itself. Whenever something significant is about to happen, there is significant opposition. When breakthrough is near, the attack gets fierce. When harvest is around the corner, the pressure intensifies. It's in those moments that many people give up because they mistake the battle as a sign they're failing. In reality, the battle is the clearest confirmation you're advancing. You don't need to interpret the enemy's resistance as proof you're unqualified. If anything, it's evidence that you are carrying something he's terrified you'll discover. The most dangerous believer isn't the one who knows every answer or gets everything perfect. The most dangerous believer is the one who refuses to bow to intimidation and keeps showing up anyway. Because sooner or later, the enemy realizes he can't stop a person who has decided that the cost of quitting is greater than the cost of pressing on. Look back over your life and you'll see the pattern if you pay attention. Every time you were on the verge of stepping into something new, a new season, a new relationship, a new opportunity, suddenly confusion would show up. Fear would start whispering in your ear. Doubt would start making you question whether you were really equipped for this. That's not a coincidence. That's a tactic. If the enemy can get you to surrender in your mind, he never has to face you in reality. If he can convince you to give up, he won't have to worry about you growing up into the person you were created to be. You can't always control the attacks that come against you, but you can control how you interpret them. You can decide that instead of seeing the battle as a reason to shrink back, you will see it as a reason to stand tall. You can decide that you are not going to allow fear to define you. You can decide that when the pressure comes, you will not crumble under it but grow stronger through it. Because the enemy only targets what is valuable. He only fights what he fears. And the fact that he's been fighting you so hard is the loudest confirmation that you are carrying something worth protecting. You have to learn to see the pressure as proof. Proof that you are on the right path. Proof that your life has impact. Proof that you are more than what your past tried to label you as. The enemy isn't attacking you over where you've been. He's attacking you over where you're going. He's trying to make sure you never step into the identity and authority you were designed to walk in. That's why you feel the weight. That's why you feel the fatigue. That's why you've been questioning whether you're even capable of finishing what you started. But don't you see? The fact that it's hard doesn't mean you're weak. It means you're worth fighting. The fact that the warfare has been relentless doesn't mean you're defeated. It means you're dangerous. There are entire generations connected to the decisions you make in this season. There are people you've never met whose lives will be touched because you refuse to back down. There are doors that will open because you kept standing when everything in you wanted to sit down and surrender. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply stay in the fight. When you stay in the fight, you send a message to the forces working against you that you're not going to be easily intimidated. You remind the darkness that it doesn't get the final word over your life. You show every doubt and every fear that your faith is stronger than the pressure. You declare by your perseverance that what's in you is greater than what's coming against you. You might not feel courageous right now. You might feel exhausted, discouraged, and outmatched. But courage isn't the absence of fear. It's the decision that fear won't be the one calling the shots. It's waking up in the morning when your heart is heavy and choosing to keep moving forward. It's showing up with faith even when your feelings haven't caught up yet. It's believing that if you keep sowing in tears, you will reap in joy. If you knew how much was riding on your resilience, you wouldn't downplay your struggle. You'd understand that the enemy is investing so much energy into stopping you because he knows what will happen if you keep going. He knows that your obedience will unlock blessings not just for you, but for the people around you. He knows that your persistence will become a testimony that inspires others to rise. He knows that your refusal to quit will shift the atmosphere of your home, your community, and your generation. Don't allow the size of the battle to convince you that you're not equipped. The battle is big because the blessing is big. The enemy isn't omniscient, but he has seen enough to know that if you ever get confident in who you are and what you carry, you'll become unstoppable. That's why the attacks have been so personal. That's why the pressure has been so intense, because he's afraid of you realizing that the very things you think disqualify you are the things God can use most powerfully. Some of the greatest threats to the kingdom of darkness are ordinary people who have decided to believe that their life matters. People who have determined that even if nobody else claps for them, they will keep going. People who have discovered that their worth doesn't come from other people's validation, but from the one who created them. You don't have to be the most talented, the most connected, or the most experienced. You just have to be willing to stay in the battle when quitting feels easier. There will be moments when you feel like you're making no progress at all. Moments when it seems like every step forward costs you more than you can afford to pay. Moments when you wonder if it would be simpler to just settle for less and stop expecting more. But deep down, you know you can't do that. You know you weren't created to live a life of mediocrity. You know there's something inside you that refuses to be silenced. You know that if you walked away now, you'd always wonder what would have happened if you had held on just a little longer. It's not pride to believe you're carrying something valuable. It's humility to acknowledge that you've been entrusted with a purpose bigger than yourself. That purpose is why you can't afford to give in to the voice that tells you it's not worth it. That purpose is why you have to learn to see the attacks as a backhanded compliment. That purpose is why you have to keep reminding yourself that the enemy targets what God has marked as valuable. Every setback is an opportunity to strengthen your resolve. Every disappointment is a chance to deepen your dependence. Every challenge is a classroom where your faith is refined and your courage is tested. You're not just fighting for yourself. You're fighting for every person whose freedom is connected to your victory. You're fighting for every person who will be inspired by your example. You're fighting for every promise that has yet to be fulfilled. You don't have to have all the answers to keep moving forward. You don't have to feel strong every day to be strong. Strength is measured by your willingness to keep taking steps even when you can't see the finish line. Sometimes the most anointed thing you can do is simply refuse to quit. The enemy will try to convince you that persistence is pointless, that your efforts are wasted, that nothing is shifting. But heaven sees every tear you've cried, every sacrifice you've made, every seed you've sown in faith. There's something about a person who has decided they will not be moved, someone who has settled in their spirit that no attack will define them, someone who knows that the value of what they carry is worth every ounce of struggle. Because once you realize the enemy is targeting you precisely because you're valuable, you stop feeling sorry for yourself and start rising to the occasion. You stop wishing the battle would go away and start seeing it as confirmation that you're exactly where you're supposed to be. Don't let the difficulty of this season convince you to settle for survival when you were created for victory. Don't let the noise of your critics drown out the truth of your calling. Don't let the weariness in your bones become louder than the purpose in your spirit. You have made it through too much to start shrinking back now. You have come too far to let the pressure break you. You have fought too many battles to walk away before you see the blessing that has been waiting on the other side of this warfare. The fact that it's been hard is not an indictment against you. It's evidence of what you carry. It's evidence of what you're called to build. It's evidence that you are part of something bigger than your own comfort and convenience. If you could see the ripple effect of your perseverance, you'd never doubt again whether it was worth it. The enemy is terrified that you'll discover just how impactful your life can be. That's why the attacks have been so relentless. That's why you've faced what you've faced. But you are still here, still standing, still believing, still fighting. And that alone is proof that what's in you is greater than what's coming against you. You have to remember that persistence is not just a personality trait, it's a spiritual declaration. Every time you keep showing up in the face of adversity, you are prophesying over your life. I will not bow to fear. I will not settle for less. I will not surrender what I've been entrusted with. When you decide you will not retreat, you strip the enemy of one of his greatest weapons, intimidation. Because he can't do anything with someone who refuses to be moved by temporary circumstances. And yes, the circumstances are temporary, even if they've lasted longer than you expected. Even if the hardship feels like it has no expiration date. Even if the struggle has become so familiar that you can barely remember what it was like to live without it. Just because it has been this way doesn't mean it will always be this way. You are not stuck. You are in process. You are not defeated. You are being developed. You are not forgotten. You are being forged. It would be easier if the attacks were predictable. But the enemy is strategic. He doesn't always attack you in obvious ways. Sometimes the attack comes in the form of distraction, disguised as opportunity. Sometimes it comes in the form of exhaustion, convincing you that you have nothing left to give. Sometimes it comes as disillusionment, whispering that all your effort is wasted. That's why you have to stay spiritually alert. You have to be willing to look past the surface of your circumstances and discern what is really going on. Because the enemy doesn't mind if you stay busy as long as you stay empty. He doesn't mind if you look productive as long as you never step into your purpose. He doesn't mind if you maintain the appearance of success as long as you never carry the substance of it. He knows that if he can get you to doubt your value, you'll eventually forfeit your victory. That's why the battle for your mind is often the fiercest. If he can take your perspective, he doesn't need to take anything else, because your perspective determines your perseverance. But you have to remember that you are not fighting for victory. You are fighting from victory. You are not trying to earn the favor of God. You already have it. You are not trying to prove your worth. You are already worthy because he said so. The pressure you're facing is not an indicator that God has abandoned you. It's proof that he has entrusted you with something so significant that it requires opposition to even begin to reveal its weight. And sometimes that opposition isn't just external. Sometimes it shows up in the form of internal warfare. The battle between what you believe and what you feel, between what you know is true and what you see in front of you. You might be standing in a season where nothing makes sense, where the evidence doesn't match the promise, where the struggle seems too heavy to carry. But you can still declare, this season will not break me, it will build me. Because every battle is an opportunity to become more of who you were created to be. Every struggle is a chance to strengthen your resolve. Every setback is a setup for God to do something that cannot be explained by your own ability. You may feel like you're surrounded, but you're actually being protected. You may feel like you're outnumbered, but you're backed by a power that cannot be defeated. If you ever doubt your value, look at the cost it took to redeem you. The enemy wouldn't spend so much energy trying to derail you if you weren't destined to do something significant. He wouldn't attack your confidence if your confidence didn't threaten his agenda. He wouldn't try to steal your joy if your joy wasn't a weapon. He wouldn't target your mind if your clarity wasn't critical to your calling. When you understand this, you stop taking the attacks so personally. You start recognizing them for what they are, a sign that you matter, a sign that your life is not insignificant, a sign that you are called to do something that terrifies the kingdom of darkness. You start realizing that if you weren't valuable, you'd be left alone. You'd be ignored. You wouldn't be targeted. But because you are marked by God, you have become a target to the enemy. But hear me, just because you are targeted doesn't mean you are defeated. Just because you are opposed doesn't mean you are outmatched. The one who marked you is greater than the one who's trying to break you. The one who called you is stronger than the one who's trying to silence you. The one who formed you already knew every obstacle you'd face and still declared that you were chosen. You have to decide that the attacks will not determine your identity, that the opinions of others will not dictate your destiny, that the disappointments of your past will not disqualify you from your future. You have to decide that the fact you are still standing after everything you've been through is evidence that God's hand is on your life. And yes, the attacks hurt. Yes, the pressure feels overwhelming. Yes, there are moments when you feel like you can't keep going. But don't confuse fatigue with failure. Don't confuse discouragement with disqualification. Don't confuse a difficult season with a defeated purpose. You can be tired and still chosen. You can be weary and still appointed. You can be overwhelmed and still anointed. If you knew how close you were to breakthrough, you'd keep moving. If you knew how many people are watching your endurance and finding the courage to keep going themselves, you'd refuse to quit. If you knew how much the enemy fears your persistence, you'd see every attack as an opportunity to prove that he cannot stop what God has started. Your story isn't over. Your best days are not behind you. Your purpose is not expired. You are still breathing because there is still something God wants to do through you. And the enemy knows it. That's why the attacks have been so relentless. Because if he can't destroy you, he'll try to distract you. If he can't distract you, he'll try to discourage you. If he can't discourage you, he'll try to discredit you. But he can't define you because only your Creator has that authority. So when you feel the pressure, don't panic. When you feel the heat, don't retreat. When you feel the resistance, don't assume it means you're failing. It means you're forging. You're being forged into someone who can carry the weight of the blessing that's coming. You're being forged into someone who will not collapse under the responsibility of influence. You're being forged into someone who can be trusted with more because you've proven you won't compromise for less. And that's the part most people don't see. They see the blessing but don't see the battle. They see the favor but don't see the fight. They see the platform but don't see the process. They don't know the nights you cried yourself to sleep. They don't know the mornings you woke up wondering if you were crazy to keep believing. They don't know the warfare you endured in silence because you didn't want to burden anyone else. But God knows, He sees. He has been with you in every valley, every struggle, every hidden battle, and He has been using it all. He doesn't waste your pain. He doesn't waste your tears. He doesn't waste your waiting. Every moment has been preparation. Every trial has been training. Every setback has been a setup for a comeback that will bring Him glory. If you could see the other side of this struggle, you'd understand why the enemy is so determined to stop you here, because he knows if you get past this point, he can't touch you in the same way again. He knows that if you learn how to fight back instead of shrinking back, he'll lose his power over you. He knows that if you ever start to believe you are truly valuable, you'll start walking in the authority that comes with that revelation. This is why you can't afford to give up. You can't afford to believe the lie that you're not enough. You can't afford to minimize what you carry, because your obedience isn't just about you. It's about the people connected to your purpose, the lives that will be impacted by your courage, the generations that will be changed because you refuse to bow. When you feel overwhelmed, remember this. You were not chosen because you were the strongest, the smartest, or the most qualified. You were chosen because God delights in taking ordinary people and doing extraordinary things through them, so that when the story is told, no one can take credit but Him. So that when the breakthrough comes, everyone will know it was His power, not your own. Your value was determined before you ever faced a single battle. You were marked before you were attacked. You were loved before you were wounded. And you are still called, even now, in the middle of the struggle. The enemy may try to convince you otherwise, but he is a liar. And the truth is this: you are valuable because God says so. You are chosen because God decided so. You are equipped because God has empowered you. So lift your head, wipe your tears, square your shoulders. You may be in the fight of your life, but you are not fighting alone. You are not fighting unarmed. You are not fighting unprepared. You are fighting with the full backing of heaven. You are fighting with the authority of the one who defeated death itself. You are fighting with the same Spirit that raised Christ from the dead living inside you. And that means you will not be defeated. You will not be overcome. You will not be destroyed. You will rise. You will endure. You will see the goodness of God in the land of the living, because the enemy only targets what is valuable, and you, my friend, are priceless. When you really grasp that your life is evidence of God's investment, you stop measuring your worth by what's going right. You stop interpreting resistance as rejection. You start realizing that the blessing isn't only waiting at the end of the battle, it's being formed in the battle. Too often we spend our energy trying to escape what's hard instead of asking, what is this hardship trying to reveal? Maybe you've prayed, God, just make it stop. But what if He's saying, I'm going to use this to show you what you're really made of? Because the gold doesn't rise to the surface until it's subjected to the fire. The impurities don't get separated until the heat is applied. You can't grow in ease. You grow in adversity. You grow when your faith collides with impossibility and you choose to trust anyway. You grow when your hope is tested by disappointment and you decide to keep expecting good things from God. You grow when your confidence is shaken by criticism, but you keep showing up with your head held high. Every time you stand back up, you're proving to the darkness that you know whose you are. Every time you keep moving forward when quitting would be easier, you're proving that the power in you is stronger than the pressure against you. Every time you forgive instead of holding a grudge, you're proving that you refuse to let bitterness bury your blessing. There is a weight to what you carry that you may not fully appreciate. Sometimes you see yourself as ordinary because you've grown familiar with your gifts. But if you could see the way the enemy studies you, if you could see how nervous hell gets when you wake up in the morning, you'd understand why you face so much warfare. It's because you carry an influence you haven't even begun to walk in yet. You carry solutions to problems you haven't encountered. You carry encouragement that will lift others out of despair. You carry perspective that will unlock purpose in people who have lost their way. You carry a calling that cannot be canceled by circumstances. And the enemy has watched generations rise and fall. He knows what it looks like when someone finally realizes their authority. He knows what it means when you start to pray like you believe God is listening. He knows what it does to his plans when you decide that fear will not govern your decisions anymore. That's why he doesn't wait until you're standing in the fullness of your calling to start the attacks. He tries to sabotage you in seed form. If he can get you to question your identity before you ever walk in your influence, he can convince you to bury what God planted. If he can make you believe that every battle is proof you're failing, he can get you to disqualify yourself before you ever step up. If he can get you so exhausted by the process, you'll abandon the promise. But here's the truth. You're more resilient than you realize. You've survived things that should have taken you out. You've endured seasons where you didn't see any fruit. You've walked through fire and come out refined instead of reduced. You have been pressed but not crushed, persecuted but not abandoned, struck down but not destroyed. You have to learn to see your scars as proof that you're still here. Your scars are not signs of failure. They are reminders that you've overcome. They are monuments to the faithfulness of God. They are evidence that no matter what came against you, it wasn't strong enough to take you out. And if you're still breathing, God is still working. You might be carrying wounds that nobody knows about, private battles that you fought alone, silent struggles that you haven't dared to speak out loud. But God has seen every tear, heard every unspoken prayer, and collected every piece of your brokenness to use it for his glory. Nothing is wasted. Don't underestimate the cumulative impact of staying faithful in small things. You may think it doesn't matter. Showing up when you feel invisible, doing the right thing when no one is applauding, choosing integrity when compromise would be easier. But that is exactly how character is forged. That is how you become trustworthy with bigger assignments. Some people want the platform but don't want the process. They want the blessing, but not the burden. They want the influence, but not the intimacy with God that sustains it. But you can't bypass the process and still keep the blessing, because what God builds in you through the struggle is the very thing that will sustain you in the harvest. You have to decide that you will not forfeit what is yours just because it's hard, that you will not trade the eternal for the temporary relief of giving up, that you will not shrink to fit the comfort of people who don't have the courage to go where you're going. There's a price to carrying something significant. You will be misunderstood, you will be criticized, you will be opposed, but you will also see miracles. You will witness transformation. You will experience joy that cannot be manufactured in shallow places. The deeper the battle, the deeper the blessing. The harder the fight, the greater the reward. And it's not always material. Sometimes the blessing is the resilience you develop. Sometimes it's the compassion that grows out of your pain. Sometimes it's the unshakable peace you find in the middle of chaos. Sometimes it's the unexplainable strength that shows up right when you thought you couldn't go another step. And yes, sometimes the blessing is buried so deep in the battle that you won't even recognize it until you look back. But when you do, you'll see that the moments you wanted to quit were actually the moments God was most present. You'll see that what felt like a delay was actually divine timing. You'll see that what you thought was rejection was really redirection. So don't curse the battle. Thank God for the strength it's producing. Don't despise the struggle. Acknowledge the wisdom it's giving you. Don't resent the resistance. Recognize that it's building the endurance you'll need for what's next. There is a version of you on the other side of this that is stronger, wiser, more courageous. A version of you that walks in authority. A version of you that is unbothered by the opinions of people who don't understand your assignment. A version of you that carries peace in any environment. That version of you is being formed in the battle you're fighting right now. You have to make up your mind that you're not leaving empty-handed. If you have to fight through tears, you're going to fight. If you have to walk through fire, you're going to walk. If you have to wait longer than you expected, you're going to wait with expectancy, not with resignation. Don't let the enemy convince you that your waiting is wasted time. It's in the waiting that God refines your motives, purifies your heart, and aligns your desires with His will. It's in the waiting that He strips away your dependence on outcomes so you can find your satisfaction in His presence alone. When you realize that, you stop seeing the waiting as punishment. You start seeing it as preparation. You start realizing that God loves you too much to promote you prematurely. He loves you too much to let you settle for a shallow version of your calling. He loves you too much to let you build your identity on anything but His love. That's why you can't compare your process to someone else's progress. You don't know what battles they're fighting behind the scenes. You don't know what they had to overcome to get where they are. You don't know what God is protecting you from by keeping you hidden a little longer. Don't let impatience rob you of what God is doing in the dark. Some of the most important work happens where no one else can see it. Roots grow underground before fruit appears above ground. Foundations are laid before walls are built. Character is formed in private before it's revealed in public. So if you feel like you're buried, remember, seeds are buried before they bloom. You're not buried to be forgotten. You're buried to be planted. You're not hidden to be ignored. You're hidden to be prepared. You're not overlooked. You're being overshadowed by God's hand as He does something sacred in you. One day, the season that feels so heavy will make sense. One day, the tears you're crying now will be the water that nourishes someone else's hope. One day, the struggle that feels unending will be the story you tell to prove that God is faithful. But for now, keep showing up. Keep believing. Keep fighting. Keep worshiping in the middle of the war. Keep trusting when you can't trace the outcome. Keep declaring that the blessing is buried in the battle and you're not leaving until you find it. Because you are not here by accident. You are not in this fight by chance. You are marked. You are chosen. You are equipped. And the enemy's greatest fear is that you will wake up to that reality and start living like it's true. So take a breath. Lift your eyes. Square your shoulders. This battle is not your end. It's your beginning. And when the dust settles, you will still be standing. Not because you never struggled, but because you never surrendered. Not because you never doubted, but because you never let doubt dictate your decisions. Not because you were the strongest, but because you stayed connected to the one who is. You're going to make it. You're going to come out with more than you went in with. You're going to see the goodness of God in ways you never imagined. And when you do, you'll realize that the blessing was never separate from the battle. It was wrapped inside it all along.